Michael, you're not muted. I don't know if you wanted to mute or not.
No, I was getting all ready for the roll call.
Yes, the roll call. I made a note of this. Do I show up all right on the screen, Stuart? Because half my face is missing on my side too. All I see is your lips.
I fooled a Michael. We're missing the top of your head there, buddy, but you know, there's nothing special.
Okay, so the meeting is streaming live. We're all ready to go whenever you're.
Okie dokie. Can you see me well enough, Amanda?
I can see you, yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Are we 6:30 yet? 6:30. I show
Yes.
6:30. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for June the 7th, 2021. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 hours. Let's start with a roll call. We got here Councillor Baxter.
Here.
Parkinson.
Present.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Here.
Mayor Martin, are you there somewhere?
Present.
Thank you. And unfortunately, Councillors Logan and Day send their regrets this evening. So it's up to us. Approval of the agenda. Everyone's had a chance to look at the near-term, long-term, and Committee of the Whole agenda for this evening. Do we have anyone opposed to? Okay, I see a hand. Let's see here. Hang on a second. Councillor Parkinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. On the long-term agenda, item 1, the review of the Transportation Master Plan, it seems to have the Machosen Road crossed out. Sort of, I think that indicates it's complete. Whereas at the Transportation Committee last week or a couple of weeks ago, both Councillor Kobayashi and I had some reservations because their traffic numbers were pretty different than what we had started looking at. And rather than make a motion at that time to bring it back, we had elected to let staff go away, think about this, and when they came back to council, we could decide then whether we wanted to make a motion to revisit all of Machosen Road or not. So I don't think it's complete. I wouldn't want to see it showing up as being complete when I think we still have that desire, on at least my part, to have another rethink of it.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. I see Robert has turned on his video.
Thank you, Chair Jansen. We will correct this. You are correct, Councillor Parkinson. Council has directed that this item or portions of the Machosen Road conversation return for further consideration.
And thank you. So including that amendment there, do I have any other naysayers for the agendas as noted? And we'll consider that adopted by consent. Adoption of the minutes for May 3rd, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. We've all had a chance to review those. Again, does anyone have any issues? None noted. We'll consider those adopted. Public participation. Sorry, just back up one tad. I did miss something at the beginning here. I did want to say before public participation that we acknowledge that we're meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples. I apologize. I meant to lead with that. Amanda, we have people on the line waiting, do we?
Yes, so we had 2 written submissions for tonight's meeting that were appended to the agenda and forwarded to council for review. We have Ron Fisher on the line. If you would like to speak now, Ron, please press *6. to unmute yourself.
Welcome,
Yes,
Mr.
good evening. Thank you. My name is Ronald Fisher. My address is 805 Bexhill Place, B9C 3V5 in Colwood. I am the secretary of Strata number VIS 2420, chair of the negotiating team for Strata's VIS 2420 and VIS 2419, which each of those stratas comprise 15 homes on Bexhill Place up on Triangle Mountain. And I wish to speak to item 6.1 on the agenda, the report from staff. I want to say that the stratas appreciate the opportunity to speak with council and staff on this long-standing issue. And if there's an opportunity to answer any questions that might come up when the item is addressed, if that's appropriate, I'd be happy to. You're aware, of course, I think, that since early 2020, our negotiation team has interacted in a cooperative and professional manner with city staff to work towards clarifying technical issues, ultimately reaching agreement based on our proposal of July 2019, which was in response to the city's notice of civil claim filed with the Supreme Court of BC in September 2018. The points in our proposal, 4 of them, are included and commented on in the report. Let me say that we believe that we are close to the resolution of this matter, and the report to be considered this evening represents a significant step forward in our view. We hope that the recommended steps can be carried out quickly and that a final report to council will be completed and discussed soon. Now, as you know, the basic exchange in our potential agreement is the transfer of ownership of a piece of property identified as Lot C to the city for the Strata's connection to the municipal sewer system and the decommissioning of our existing treatment system, as called for in the original option to purchase that the city had with Orca Estates, July 1992. That option is then Strata's. In this regard, the report provides useful information and options for council to consider. Option 1, pages 3 to 4, is the more acceptable outcome for the Stratas. However, I have to say that in terms of the options for the responsibilities of transfer, page 4, we note that the decommissioning of the treatment plant on Lot C as a city responsibility has never been at issue. We've seen it, either in the option to purchase or in our proposal. We assert that the city should be responsible for all connection and upgrade charges and fees, including the decommissioning of our current treatment system. We believe that this is fair consideration in exchange for a property that is now estimated by your staff to be worth in excess of $3. We're very hopeful that we can reach a mutually satisfactory resolution during the summer and that the connections transfer can be complete. Thank you for your attention and consideration.
And thank you, Mr. Fisher, for shedding some light on that. And Amanda, I believe Ben Mycroft is on hold as well.
I was expecting him to be, but he has not joined the meeting yet.
Okay, so if he does sign in, you can maybe let us know and we'll maybe come back to him or give him a moment or two.
Thank you.
4.1. 4.1, public correspondence. 4.1. Sorry, 4.1. Does that relate to this evening's agenda, or is that in relation to the public participation, Amanda?
That is in relation to public participation.
Yeah.
So we had the 2 written submissions that were appended to the agenda. And they were available to council early this afternoon.
Perfect. So there's no one to speak to that. And so we're on to old business. 5.1, Mr. Borhill, everything we ever wanted to know about on and off street parking.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight is a part two to a conversation that started at the previous committee of the whole meeting regarding an off-street parking bylaw that's been proposed and is presented for the committee's review. Staff's recommendation, which I'll recap quickly before handing it over to Dan Casey, our lead consultant with Urban Systems, was that committee of the whole consider recommending to council that the draft off-street parking regulations bylaw and draft parking variance policy be endorsed in principle, and that public comment be solicited prior to returning council with final drafts. So really at the end stages of this project where we'd like to get this draft bylaw and policy out to the public for final comment. We received some very good comment from Gable Craft as well as the CRD in the last couple of weeks, as well as some questions from members of council, which we've put on the agenda along with staff's answers appended to this agenda. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Dan Casey.
Thanks, Ian. Dan?
Great. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair. Can you you hear me all right here?
Sounds great.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to share a screen. And I'm going to walk through just an abbreviated version of the presentation that I gave about a month ago at Committee of the Whole. Okay, great. So yeah, so rather than a fulsome presentation like was given last time, we thought we'd just give a kind of a recap on some of the key pieces, and of course offer the opportunity for a question and comment afterwards. So we are here tonight dealing with Colwood off-street parking regulations bylaw and variance policy. Refresher, the three key project outcomes, the three key deliverables as a result of the work. The first is the off-street parking regulations bylaw, available currently in draft. Two is a parking variance policy, also available in draft. And three, the amending bylaw. And I'll touch on just some of the very high-level key points for each of these. So the off-street parking regulations bylaw, some of the key highlights include in the proposed bylaw include updated parking supply rates and land use classifications. It includes parking supply rates that, and this is new for Colwood, parking supply rates that are specific or differentiated by location. It's what we mean by that is shown on the map on the right, areas in red, which align with some of your key OCP designations around city center, transit corridors, neighborhood centers. They're treated as urban, and there's distinct parking requirements for certain uses for those areas that are different from those in the other more outlying areas. Other key pieces include requirements for enhanced higher quality parking facility design, including landscape and walkways. The new requirement for EV electrification, so that being basically pre-wired to allow for chargers when the time comes, as well as updates to your accessibility requirements. And then lastly, updated bicycle parking requirements, including new end-of-trip facilities, things like showers and lockers that allow commuters to, bicycle commuters to change at their end of their trip, as well as requirements for scooter parking. The parking variance policy. This is a policy that would clarify the conditions where variances may be considered from those requirements in the off-street parking regulations. A variance request would need to be accommodated by a technical study that rationalizes the proposed parking supply. And there's a recommendation in the draft that minor variances be referred through staff. And so those being the variances of a lesser magnitude where they can be dealt with more quickly and more effectively through staff. And a recap on those key conditions in the variance policy, one being housing diversity, opportunities where transportation demand management, so strategies that support reduced vehicle ownership and parking demand. Three being sites that are close to public transit and have a reasonable level of transit service available to them. Four being sites that might have the opportunity for shared parking where the total site need for parking might be dealt with more effectively by sharing the overall supply. And last, where parking facility design is proposed to go above and beyond what is required. And third is the amending bylaw. And so this is more of a procedural bylaw that decouples parking regulations from the land use bylaw. So right now there are the parking regulations are dealt with in the land use bylaw. The new off-street parking regulations bylaw would basically pull out and recreate those parking related regulations. And this amending bylaw is required to then basically remove those current parking related regulations from the land use bylaw. So next steps, we're here seeking direction from council from this, looking to move forward to seek public and stakeholder feedback. There would be a public review period on the draft materials, and then finally back at council to, based on public feedback, based on council direction, updated bylaw, updated policy for council endorsement. So that's all I intended to present tonight, to keep it quite succinct, but of course, more than happy to field any questions or discussion. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd also like to update the committee on some outreach work we did last week. So myself and Dan Casey made a presentation and facilitated a discussion with the Intermunicipal Advisory Committee on Disability Issues on June 3rd. And they committed to providing us additional written feedback on the bylaw. So I just wanted to mention that as an update on that front.
Sounds good. Thank you. If you could unshare your screen, please, Mr. Casey. Thank you. Now, just before we embark on this discussion here, I've had a bit of a chat with his worship and with staff, and my understanding of the objective for this evening, which I think Mr. Borhill clarified, is that staff would like to get this out to the public. So it's less about us nitpicking line by line by line, because it will be coming back to us, and more about clearing it off our docket here and sending it out for public consultation, after which it will come back and we'll have an even more fulsome discussion. Having said that, I do believe Mayor Martin, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. So I a couple quick questions. The first is, during the last presentation, I asked a question about multimodal interactions with the charging stations, and if there was any chances of, for example, a person charging their electric bike at the same place that you would be charging your electric car. Was staff or the consultant able to do any work on that to see if that's actually something that we should be encouraging or discouraging?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair. The bylaw, as it's currently written, proposes 110-volt plugs to be provided as the charging facility. So that's a standard 15-amp plug outlet that would be available for the charging of bikes and the charging of vehicles. Now, one outlet is currently proposed to be required per parking space, so it would be a matter of which vehicle is being charged at each time.
Okay, I guess, thank you. Through the chair, my question was more directed around safety and the interaction of those different modalities using the same electrification systems. And I'm just curious, do we know, is that encouraged? Is that discouraged?
Through the chair, if Dan Casey has any comment, please go ahead, but we'll have to take note of this and return with additional research if need be. I might just clarify, are we talking about just the physical interaction of the vehicles?
Correct.
Okay.
So for example, I'll use an example. There's charging stations presently at Royal Bay Secondary for cars. Would we be encouraging that a person could just use that spot up for their bicycle and take up that entire spot because they're charging their bike? Or would we expect that there would be an opposite or a different area that we would be encouraging those people to use those spots? That was the direction of the question. So if staff need to come back with that, that's great. I'm fine with that. It's just, I would like to just understand, I'm concerned from a safety standpoint. My second question is us providing electrical 110 outlets, for example, for bicycles. I know, for example, at Royal Bay Secondary right now, there are several teachers who do not feel like their electric bike is safe enough to leave outside, and that the standard bike systems to lock up are not sufficient enough to encourage them. And so in fact, the teachers are bringing their bikes into their classrooms because they don't feel safe. Has there been any work, or is there any different types of systems that we should be looking at as we move forward around the different types of bike? Because we're talking about now these bikes that can be $2,000 to $3,000, and tying a lock just into one of the wheels is not really what people are looking for. And I'm wondering, is that going to be a significant cost to the municipality if we need to change how we're setting that security system up? Has there been any work done on that?
I'm happy to field that. So through the chair, I think it is a real challenge. And so historically, obviously, conventional bicycles, they've been cheaper bicycles, they've been more expensive bicycles. But as we get into electric bicycles, they all tend to be at the midpoint or higher in terms of price point. I think what the bylaw lays out are requirements in new development to provide quality long-term bike parking facilities. How comfortable people are going to be putting if they have a bicycle they've invested a reasonable amount of money in, how comfortable they're going to be putting them in those facilities, I don't know for certain. I think, but what we will be guaranteeing is that new development will come with these secured, properly designed, properly laid out facilities.
So may I say that back to you then? So what I am hearing is we are requiring more than just the 110 amp. We are requiring a security system that will support that in the bylaw. Is that correct?
So through the chair, it's not about the security system itself. That is not an item that is being proposed to be required, but a secured facility, something with a locked entry that only individuals that should have access to the facility will have, as well as attachments, usually inverted U-shaped attachments bolted to the ground that would allow an individual to lock their bike securely to it.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I can't see the order here. My screen is locked. Amanda, I'm gonna step out of the meeting after I call for Councillor Kobayashi, and if you can let me back in here because my screen's locked. Councillor Kobayashi.
I believe Councillor Baxter, then me, Chair.
I can't see the order, so go ahead, Michael. Thank you.
You're muted, Michael.
Right. Well, that would just be normal, wouldn't it? So I just want to comment on the bike issues as I'm next. I take my bike and which is a $3,500 bike, and lock it up anywhere I happen to go, whether it's downtown in Colwood or downtown in one of the other municipalities, and I've never had a problem. I did inquire at the bike shop when I bought it whether these things are frequently stolen, and they said not really, not in Victoria, although I gather it happens pretty regularly in Vancouver. I may be living in a dream world, but I haven't heard of anybody else's being stolen either. If a bike is left unlocked, it will be taken for a joyride, if nothing else. And electric bikes make really bad joyriders if you don't have the means of turning the power on, which I always carry in my pocket, because they're heavy bikes. The other point is I would never charge my bike at somewhere like Royal Bay Secondary School because it needs a charger that is separate from the bike and that is not waterproof, as well as being easily stolen. So, and in fact, I've been having this discussion with other people about the whole concept of bike charging rooms in apartments, because the battery always comes off the bike. That's standard as far as I know. And if I lived in an apartment building, even if I didn't take the bike upstairs, I would take the battery upstairs and charge it. Partly because you need to be able to monitor how much power you're adding to it. Fully charging one of these lithium-ion bikes shortens its life unless you're about to leave and run it down again. So I think everybody charging their bike battery would want to monitor it. Mine's actually charging right now right beside me, so I can see when it gets near limit and unplug it. So those are my comments about bikes. I would recommend that staff talk to biking groups that know more about this than I do, and maybe even people who sell them. But going back to the general issue, I just have a question for staff. As I read this bylaw, this bylaw does not in any way apply to the parking arrangements for existing homes. And I just asked that question because we have one letter, and I've seen some talk on Facebook where people are evidently assuming that it does apply to existing homes. So could staff just state that for the record?
Certainly, and through the chair. I did receive a question from a member of the public who had posted on Facebook, and I was happy to receive the question. The parking requirements apply across the community for existing as well as new uses. Now, when a facility, a new multifamily building, for example, is built, we wouldn't be retroactively requiring new parking spaces. They would be grandparented. However, it's important to note that for single family dwellings, we're not proposing changes to the parking requirements. So the 2 spaces per unit requirement that's currently in place is proposed to be maintained.
Okay, so again, as I read this bylaw, it actually states the regulations within this bylaw shall not apply to building structures or uses existing at the time of adoption of this bylaw. And there are some exceptions, but those are if you're increasing the size of the building substantially. Have I misunderstood that?
Yes, and through the chair, that's in reference to the grandparenting that would exist for those existing uses.
Okay, thank you. Eventually we will have the changes to the on-street parking, and there are some changes proposed there that may affect existing residents, but that's a discussion to come. Is that right?
The off-street, the on-street parking?
Yeah.
Yes, so the council direction currently is to draft policy options that would be coming back to council for consideration, yes.
Right, okay, thank you. I have a question about most of the commercial uses where the minimum energized spaces would be 10%. Is there some basis for that 10%, or is it just matching what other jurisdictions have done?
Yeah, I'm happy to field that, and through the chair, it was a look over to what other places are doing. There is precedent in other communities for thresholds that are higher than that. There's obviously a number of communities that have nothing in the way of electrification in place.
And obviously, we're all at the beginning of this. And even those communities that have had regulations in place probably haven't built very many buildings since those regulations were in place. Would you say that we're probably going to have to monitor this as it plays out here and elsewhere, and perhaps alter it as we go along?
Through the chair, I think that would be a very wise thing to do, particularly given the what's anticipated in terms of the pace of adoption of electric vehicles and therefore the need for parking and charging.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could add to Mr. Casey's response, we are looking at developing options for review of bylaws like this that have impact on our greenhouse gas emissions through our low carbon resiliency plan. So that's something that staff are looking at right now in designing that project, and we'll be bringing forth to council likely in August.
Okay, thank you. I took note of Gablecraft's letter, which was further to their letter somewhat earlier. Am I right in thinking that staff and Gablecraft have discussed the issue, and that explains why Gablecraft's more recent letter is quite a bit different from the original?
Through the chair, the simple answer is yes. We had an excellent, I think, conversation today. Myself, Representative Gablecraft, Ben Mycroft, and Dan Casey. And I have to say that we were impressed with the level of detail that they brought to bear through their review in the second letter. And we're interested in looking at responses to the majority of the comments that were brought forward. I think there were some really good thoughts in that second letter that we'd like to explore further if council directs us to proceed.
Yeah, and I certainly think it would be worth further exploration. But just one comment I want to note on the whole issue of providing more than conduits and main board capacity for EV charging. It's really, really hard to look forward and see how soon every vehicle will be electric in some of these buildings. But obviously, it would seem to me that we would want at least the conduit to every single parking space. But I question whether it's a good idea to provide the means of actually charging, which I think you said is a 110 volt plug, for two reasons, really. One is that given the long time over which, and I say long time, I mean, it'll be a decade or two at least, during which the vehicles will mostly become electric, and the exact technology with which they're charged could change in 2 decades, possibly considerably. The need for a conduit won't change, and I doubt that if you put wires in those conduits, they would be outmoded. But the precise means by which they connect to the system may change in the course of a decade or two. And partly because when I bought my first electric vehicle 8 years ago, you just plugged it into a 110 volt plug because it didn't have that much range, and it could pretty much charge up overnight if you plugged it in right after supper. But today's cars have 3-4 times as much range. And I think that's going to encourage people to drive them further, obviously, and therefore they will need more charging up at night. That's supposition on my part, but it might be a reason for not going all the way to actually providing the means of charge at initial construction. So those are just my thoughts for you to take forward when you're discussing with others. And
Michael, is this a logical part to get to the next person? We can maybe circle back to you.
no, I just got one last thing to mention.
Thank you.
And that is that I trust we will have, given the information in Gablecraft's letter, I trust we'll have discussions with experts on the matter as to exactly what we should provide for mobility scooters and where we should provide it. I certainly don't know the answers to that, and maybe we need to get more heads on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in response to two of the comments that Councillor Baxter made. One, in consultation with different stakeholder groups, it's become apparent that beyond the conduit that's important for, say, multifamily situations where there's a shared underground parking space or a shared common parking area, is the electrical capacity or the electrical supply to the building. It's an extremely costly component of this. And there's some concern that if there's not adequate electrical supply, that residential stratas would be very pressed to pay for upgraded electrical service in the future. So that's one thing that's on our radar screen in terms of this regulation, and it really is it's a difficult balancing act, because if we were requiring electrical capacity now for much more costly electrical service, the Vista switches as they're called, that would impact the cost of the housing, but at the same time it would be future-proofing those units.
Yeah, and it is the main thing that's holding some of the stratas back right now, is that cost.
And through the chair, secondly, we did hear from IACD on the 3rd last week about mobility scooters, and they gave us some thoughts in terms of the location and quantity and quality of those spaces. And as I said earlier, that they are providing some written comments on just that issue that we hope to receive in the coming days.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Kobe, Councillor Parkinson's next. Sorry, Doug.
I think I have to pull a Doug and defer to Councillor Kobayashi. His hand was up before me.
I'm looking at the thing here. Okay, go ahead, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Great points brought up, Councillor Baxter. I had the same sort of concern. I was thinking more along the lines that you were, that, making sure that the power supply was there. It's just like my Acura. Who would have guessed 20 years ago you can throw your phone in your car and you don't even need to plug it in anymore, right? Who would have guessed? So, I would just say be very careful, because technology is going to supersede our current thinking right now on that. But my question is actually, my question actually is on this office building. I just want to confirm with staff through the chair that the 4,000 square foot or 4,000 square meter office building we're talking about is the long-term care facility. Am I right in assuming that, Ian?
Through the chair, if I could clarify, Councillor Kobayashi, referring to what's mentioned in the Q&A document?
Right.
I have to go back and look, but I believe that was the example that was provided. If you just provide a moment, I'll open that document.
If I could clarify, because it was my question, I was just asking for some typical examples of what parking rates would be under the new bylaw versus the old bylaw, and I asked for what if.
Okay, so here's my question then. The only thing that alarms me and concerns me right now about that, because I think your proposal is 36 square meters, in each building per person for the number of parking lots, and you came up with that number instead of existing 114 down to 89 spaces now. I'm just going to give you a different scenario. The different scenario is you have say a 4,000 square foot facility, which is, I can't think in terms of meters, but that's about what, 44,000 square feet. And say the government, provincial government in its great wisdom says, hey, we want to put more government built offices down into Colwood, like they did in Langford. So what I'm going to tell you right now is that 89, not even 114 parking spaces is going to fulfill, a provincial government coming into a 43,000 square foot facility. You're going to have a double or triple that number. So I guess it was just concerning me. That was the only one that just stood out like a sore thumb to me from a common sense point of view. I just went, this won't work. It's not going to work. So just comments on that, Ian, through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi, for that question through the chair. So to clarify my previous comments, that example that was asked to be commented on was for a 4,000 square meter office building. So under our proposed bylaw, a single tenant office building would be required to provide 89 spaces. Under the current bylaw, it would be 114. So this is assuming that this hypothetical office building is located in what was designated in the proposed bylaw as an urban center location. So that's primarily located either at Colwood Corners or the Seaside Village. You can also see that there's another area in and around Latoria Walk, as well as along the transit growth corridors. So those areas have been designated for lower lower parking requirement minimums due to their proximity to public transit.
Okay, I hear you. So I was wondering if we can get a sanity check on that number, because just something isn't ringing right on that for me, because having put up office buildings and putting in parking spaces, in a project that I worked on, there was a lot more parking spaces than that required. So I'm just going to challenge that assumption. So if that could be relooked at, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, we'll take a look at that again. And if Mr. Casey has any more comments in terms of comparables before we leave it.
Sorry, Ian, you cut out there, but through the chair, I think just to circle back on the office building rates, what we're looking at here in the draft bylaw is those rates are relatively consistent with what might be seen in other communities. I think when we get into more outlying communities, sometimes they can be a little higher, a little more onerous. When you get into downtown locations, City of Victoria and otherwise, they can be a bit, they can be a fair bit lower as well. And so we're definitely within the range of what's typically found in other places, but absolutely we can take that back and do a double check on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Finally, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. A few comments, but for my own first, when we talk about a plug-in for an electric car, and you're talking about a 110 volt plug-in, should I be picturing sort of like perhaps on the prairies where everybody's got a block heater and there's parking lots with little plugs and you can plug your block heater into? Or should I be picturing the typical ones like we've got a couple at City Hall and a couple of, at the Park and Ride site, the sort of more skookum ones? What are we talking about here?
Maybe I'll start. Through the chair, we are actually talking as an initial step, plugs that would be akin to what you see on the prairies. In recognition of the fact that the current bylaws do not require any electrification, we thought that this was a reasonable initial step to propose to council. Other communities such as Saanich are requiring the more skookum chargers that are referred to as level 2 chargers that provide for a faster charge. And so it is a matter of putting forward a balanced approach as an initial step. And if Mr. Casey has any additional comment, ask him to comment, please.
Nothing further to add. Thanks, Ian.
Okay, well, I won't drill down too much on that one. That's I guess comforting for me. I was concerned about these level 2 chargers and their expense and how many we were looking at, and whether that was legitimately an expense to the developer or an expense to the city. But it sounds like we're not talking anything that skookum. A lot of stuff here. It's funny how, in our, I guess my almost 3 years on council, we bounce around a lot of topics, and all of a sudden one like this comes that's just got so many different directions to it and arms in it. And I try to wrestle with it. And I do believe the right thing to do is to go out to the public and, get some more comments from, people like Gablecraft, who are obviously more on top of this and more aware than any of us on council could pretend to be. Because I think we need to discuss things like philosophically in Colwood, should we be looking at, generous parking, sort of adequate parking, or minimum parking? Another note I've got here is the concept of delegating variances to staff. That just doesn't sound right to me. It doesn't sound fair, at least until council's wrestled with a few. What does each staff take as guidelines? You do one good thing, you lose 10 parking spots, or you do have to do all 5 to lose 10, or something like that. So to me, it would seem like council should at least start off on that one. Maybe after a while it would become clear, and there'd be a sort of a clearer policy or direction that would be helpful for staff, and we do it. Again, things about regulating maximum parking and shared parking. I just wonder if those aren't such rare occurrences that trying to craft the bylaw to cover instances is just not a whole bunch more work and effort than it would be just to deal with them when they came. If somebody came to this council, said, listen, we got a great office building that's going to be full all day, and we got a great theater next door that's going to be full all night. We just want to share parking. I'm sure council would look at that and probably come to a reasonable answer. And then I wonder, on all these new mobility things, when we talk about the bike change stations and the bike lockups and the bike charging and the scooter charging and, who knows what else, have hoverboard charging, I guess, at some point. Are we trying to lead the parade when perhaps we'd be smarter to sit back and kind of watch a little bit? Again, it comes down to this concept of, even urban versus other areas within Colwood. I think it's pretty hard to make a definition in Colwood between urban and other. Perhaps between downtown Victoria and rural Saanich, it's easy, but it's a little harder in Colwood. Some of my other notes here. We've just changed parking standards for Royal Bay and Royal Beach. They do form a big chunk of this thing. Again, is it time to look at them again or change them, or should we say, let's let those run for a while and see? So a whole bunch of thoughts and questions. I'm not trying to say anything's wrong. I don't think we need 6 or 8 pages of how many parking stalls for every potential business that might come. I mean, we've got more businesses there than we'd ever have in Colwood by the looks of that list. It's very thorough, and good on you for doing it, and somebody put a lot of thought into it. But again, I wonder if that's a necessity. So I guess I'd be real happy to see this move along the process. Let's see what the public has to say. I can't say that it's a burning issue in my mind, or one that's really affected the comments I've got on council so far. So I'm happy to see it move forward to the public. I would not suggest that it's endorsed by council at this point. We all seem to have a number of issues in various ways. But I think we do have to be careful with some of the thoughts that Gablecraft had about what expense we're asking for versus the utility, and we're looking at expense today versus utility that we all hope will come, but maybe not for 10 or 15 years. So I'm having trouble wrestling with this. I'll admit I can't sit here and say this is exactly what we should do. So just a bunch of comments, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this. It's made me think, but it hasn't put an answer in my head yet. So I guess that's probably what you're supposed to do. So good on you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Before you go, it sounded like you were framing a motion there, so you might as well have at it.
Well, I'd be happy to move the second half of it, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that public comment be solicited prior to returning to Council with further drafts.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Amanda, did you get that slight alteration?
I did, thank you.
And do we have a seconder? I guess we don't need one. Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Discussion.
Do it as I'm told.
I'll maybe a couple of my thoughts. We keep hearing about this, these transit growth corridors, and the concern I have is the frequency isn't there. So how can we call it a transit corridor when, arguably people aren't standing out waiting for the 52 to come every half hour, because that doesn't satisfy their commuting. So I got a bit of a problem with that, and there is a cost to getting this wrong, and the cost is that traffic is forced out into our surrounding streets, and I can think of a couple of places where this is happening already. One being the building at Acacia on Souk Road, where there's a whole line of cars that pile onto Acacia every afternoon after work while people walk over to their unit. So this does have an impact on surrounding neighborhoods. And regardless of where we're at in 20 years, right now we're a bedroom community. And everybody I know drives to work. Okay, some are working at home because they have to, but soon we'll be back to driving at work, driving into town to go to work. The jobs that are here in our community are not those that would sustain the $1 million house down in Ben Mycroft's development in Royal Bay. So people are forced to leave the community to work at a suitable paying job. The economic opportunities are just not here yet to support that kind of mortgage, in my opinion. And I had a thought too, Ian and Dan. That was just commentary on my part, but I do have a specific ask. Everything always, and I mentioned this to a couple of staff members, so I apologize if I've already discussed this with you, but we always hear that everything is sunshine and unicorns with regards to parking. I want to hear about where a community missed the mark, Dan, and I'm sure in your research there are those out there, because I'm talking to other council members in Langford specifically, and I can find a couple fairly easily, but I'm going to ask that you guys do that and report back on where a community missed the mark with the parking that caused issues in the surrounding neighborhoods, and that would just allow us to make a better, more informed decision. It's not about poking holes in any of the theory. It's just, it will allow us to make a more informed decision on where the pressure points might be for us. Any thoughts on that?
Through the chair, happy to do a little bit of talking around and looking around to find a couple instances where we can isolate where those challenges have set in. I think there's probably a number of factors where that's exhibited. There's a number of factors that lead to that. That could be how the regulations were set and they turned out to be insufficient. It could be where variances were granted and then therefore the parking supply ended up being deficient. There could be instances where site specific and the combination of the commuting patterns and vehicle ownership of perhaps residents of that site that lead to that as well. And so I think I'm going to suggest also, as we do that digging, that we sort of go slightly beyond identifying it and see if we can make a guess at what the root cause was.
So I love that. That's great. And that's the kind of analysis I would love to have and see if it, if there is a lesson for us to learn as a group of civic officials in drafting this bylaw. you know, it could be that someone afforded way too much parking down. And so now they're converting parking spaces into, you know, into these electric charging stands or micro playgrounds or what have you. Maybe that's the example we're looking for, but something a little more fulsome, because it seems like everything's wonderful. We give reductions all over the place, and you know, everybody's happy, high fives, you know. And I think really honestly, the only people that win are the developers that get a little more in their back pocket, because they're certainly not paying it out of their own pocket. It's being passed on to the consumer with these $1 million bills. So I will get off my soapbox because I see a couple of hands.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, Ian, I did see you.
Sorry.
Video, go for it.
If I could just comment on your previous comments there. So in light of questions just like that were posed at the previous committee of the whole meeting, staff has worked to arrange a facilitated discussion on the economics of parking. And spoiler alert, this will be coming out in your agenda package for the June 14th Economic Prosperity Committee. So we're hoping to host a discussion facilitated by a parking expert that is really diving into the exact questions that you're asking right now. So we're hoping to bring some value to this discussion through that exercise.
That sounds great. And I see a couple of hands for discussion here. Councillor Baxter. Unmute, sorry, Michael.
Perpetually muted. Councillor Jansen, you brought up the bus, which I wanted to talk about. Thank you. Yes, the current bus service is not going to persuade to Royal Bay, that is not going to persuade anybody to give up their car, not even the most dedicated. But that will change. So I'd like to ask if staff, when they return with a report, could give us whatever indication as to timing or volume of traffic that will trigger BC Transit to improve the service to the point where it actually starts to become attractive as a means of getting to work. So if you can do that to the best of the information you've been able to glean, that would be great.
Thank you, Michael. Did you make a note of that? Sorry, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I did.
Mayor Martin.
Thank you. So speaking to the motion, since Councillor Parkinson has excluded that the draft off-street parking regulation bylaw and draft parking variance policy be endorsed in principle, my question to staff is, should we actually be going to the public yet until this committee is ready to endorse this?
Thank you, Worship, and through the chair. That wording was chosen simply to describe a desired state to which we would like this draft to be going forward to the public. It's important for us to put forward a draft bylaw that the public understands has already been reviewed by council, knowing that it is draft and subject to further review by the public and council. So that wording is simply meant to state this is a council reviewed document and endorsed in principle for the purposes of additional consultation.
I guess I'm struggling, through the chair, I'm struggling to support a motion that we don't actually are endorsing as a committee in principle. So saying that, I will not be supporting the motion this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to Ian, is there a deadline, a timeline, drop dead dates for this bylaw where it affects someone materially? I'm just wondering if there's a timeline here, so I understand what pressures are on here.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi, and through the chair. Really, this is about moving forward with the larger land use bylaw update. It was determined that this was a priority given the impact that parking requirements have on our development community and the development of the community as a whole. They're one of the most costly ways that we affect development, and we're consistently seeing development proposals requiring parking variances to proceed, which slows things down, and that's why this was prioritized. So once this process is complete, we'll be moving on to the other areas of the zoning bylaw that council has directed us to update, which include general regulations and specific zones themselves. And if I could just comment to the previous, if I could clarify my previous comments, really our expectation with the staff recommendation that was that we're not asking council to endorse all of the content of this bylaw, but simply that it be put forward to the public with the understanding that there would be options for amendment based on public consultation and the commentary provided by the committee of the whole for council's review.
So Ian, through the chair, Ian, so when do you want to get this? When are you looking at trying to finalize this? I guess that's my question here.
Ideally, we would be in a place to be giving bylaw readings as soon as the summer recess is over in August and September. The fundamental timeline here is really up to council, and if this bylaw requires additional time to get it right from council's perspective, staff is more than willing to support. But as I said, it's just part of our work planning for future tasks.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. So hearing nothing else and seeing no hands, I believe what I take away from this is, yes, it's still a document being worked on, Mr. Mayor, but it's time to consult with the public. So I'm supportive. And hearing nothing else, I'd like to call the motion. All those opposed, please raise your hand. And that motion passes with Mayor Martin, the only one opposed. Thank you, Mr. Borhill. Thanks, Dan and Casey. That was great. And
Great. Thank you, everyone.
6.1, Ms. Lockhart. Looks like Bexhill Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just share this presentation. So this first slide shows the areas of the two stratas that are on Bexhill Place. And the lower left-hand corner is the Lot C with the package treatment plant. This slide shows the existing sanitary sewer system. The red lines are sanitary sewers that are on Bexhill Place within the road right away. The blue lines are sewers in stat right of ways that are in use. The yellow lines are sanitary sewers in stat right-of-ways that are dry and were put in for future connections to a municipal sewer system. The green line is a dry sanitary sewer system, but it was found that it is in a drainage stat right-of-way, and there's no permission for a sanitary sewer to be in it. So one of the things that would need to be done is to amend that stat right-of-way to allow for a sanitary sewer. And that would allow the east side of Bexhill Place properties to be serviced by gravity down to the Fulton Road sanitary sewer. So what's done now, there's a small lift station on the cul-de-sac island of Bexhill Place that pumps sewage along the purple line over to Lot C for treatment. So summary of what's been done to date. Lot C is currently owned by the two stratas for an on-site wastewater treatment system. And Colwood has an option to purchase the land, but the stratas need to be connected to the municipal sewer system before the on-site sewer system on Lot C could be decommissioned for future use of the land. In 2015, an appraisal was done of Lot C at approximately $2.6 million. And that would be if there was no wastewater treatment system on the property. And since then, land prices have increased by about 20%. So the estimated 2021 appraisal is about $3.2 million. So staff have met with the strata representatives several times, as Mr. Fisher has said, and we've been looking at the details that will be needed for the land to be transferred over to Colwood. And in the 2021 budget, we included funds to extend the sewers on Fulton Road and from Sewell Place, and also to review the Qualta lift station capacity. Since then, we found out that there may be some maintenance issues with the Qualta lift station, and no inspections or maintenance has been done on the sanitary sewer system that the strata has been using. So an inspection should be done to determine if any repairs need to be done on that. So the staff's recommendation is to do some additional work so that we get a better idea of the future costs that might be needed to finish off the connection of the sanitary sewer system for the stratas, and that we would bring a report to council with the results of those tasks before we, in case there are any costly repair or upgrade works needed. So this concludes my presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Helen. That's great. And I see Mayor Martin is first.
Thank you. Chair, would you like me to move the recommendation, or do you want to do questions?
Go ahead and move the recommendation. We can move to discussion.
Sure, I'll move the recommendation just to speed that up. Can through the chair, can somebody explain to me, or can I get a descriptor of the sewer enhancement fund and the funding sources that comes from? I'm just wondering, is the $21,000 coming from sewer users presently? Where would that money come from?
Through the chair, that was expected to come through the sewer enhancement fund.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and Ms. Lockhart, I don't expect you to know this answer, and I don't know if there's anybody from finance on. I'm more curious about the sewer enhancement fund itself and where the funding is. I'm specifically I guess the question I'm trying to figure out is, there's a pump station, for example, at the bottom of Portsmouth Drive. And if that pump station needed to be repaired, is that the responsibility of the LAS of Portsmouth, or is that the responsibility of the entire city sewer structure? And so that anybody who's on sewers would be repaired, and vice versa in regards to the $21,000 that we're talking about today, is that coming out of revenue fund from everybody who pays into the sewer, or is that a specific LAS?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I see I see you, Brent, but I'm going to defer to Ms. Hepting that's chimed in here. Jen, if you have some insight.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just chime in. So sewer enhancement fee is payable under our sewer utility bylaw, and it is payable by any property that connects to the sewer unless they are exempted under the bylaw. So this is not necessarily funding that has arisen from every sewer user in the city. And we maintain any sewer enhancement fees that are collected. Those are set aside within our sewer capital reserve. They are specifically restricted for purposes of enhancements required to our sewer infrastructure.
Sorry, so through the chair, may I just get a clarification? I'm still a little confused just in regards to, so I'm talking about the $21,000 that is coming out of the sewer enhancement fund for the 873 I can't say the word, lift station. Who would have contributed to that sewer enhancement fund of that $21,000? Like I would think every sewer user did, but you're suggesting that not every sewer user contributed into that to fund that?
That is correct. The sewer enhancement fees are exempt for certain properties within the city, and those exemptions are outlined within the appendices to our sewer utility bylaw. But properties that are not within those exempt areas do pay a sewer enhancement fee, and we do set that aside to fund related to the restrictions that we have on that bylaw for purposes of enhancements required to the sewer infrastructure.
I'm gonna through the chair, I'm gonna just ask one more time, and this is for me, this is not anyone else. I'm having a difficult time. I understand, for example, the Portsmouth Road, I believe it was LAS 5, then 3 that hooked into 1. And so we were responsible to pay 5, 3, and 1. But would Portsmouth residents also contribute to a sewer enhancement fee on top of what they paid in 5, 3, and 1?
I don't believe so. I've got the bylaw right beside me. The exempt areas for properties that are not subject to an enhancement fee, I believe, are those properties that are within an LAS area, which would include Colwood East, previously referred to as Phase 5.
That answered my question. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Baxter, regale us with your sewer knowledge. You're muted, Michael. Sorry, after all that.
I was just gonna, I think they hit the nail on the head there, but I was just gonna say that the logic behind the enhancement fee is that if you're joining from one of the areas that hasn't spent the last many years paying for sewers, then you have to contribute a fee that helps expand the sewers. That was the original purpose, in order to take your additional flow, which wasn't in the original calculation. And this is, that will also be used for fixing or expanding pump stations as well as sewer capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support this motion. I'm a big fan of tidying up these loose ends around the community. We'll see what happens. I can see, I mean, when this subdivision was built 30 years ago, I don't think anybody expected it would go a full 20 years before it was connected to sewers. But it's, I think, one of the sad parts of Colwood that we haven't managed to sewer Triangle Mountain over that time period. But this will be another step in the right direction, I guess. I can also see from the Strata's point of view, they're probably getting a little antsy about the age of their pump station and treatment works. They may have some big bills coming up if something isn't done. So let's tidy it up. The only point I might make is if the statutory right of way for sanitary was missed somehow, well, that's a goof, I guess, at the city level, and it would be obviously a city cost to fix that up. I would suggest the decommissioning of the works owned by the Stratas, the pump station and the treatment plants. I doubt there's much residual value after 30 years, and maybe a little, but I would think that would probably be a cost to the Strata. And I don't know if, nobody wants to go hat in hand to the 30 houses to collect it. If that means it requires a tax surcharge or a local area, I don't know. But again, it should be tidied up. I'd just like to encourage everybody to keep what sounds like a cooperative attitude moving forward, and let's get her done. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parkinson. Seeing no other hands, Helen and Brent, I had a couple of notes here. Talk to me about this certificate of completion, which couldn't be found. Is this going to have an impact? I mean, do we even know if the works were completed to anyone's satisfaction?
We believe that the works have been done, and that was probably just an oversight that an official certificate was not completed.
Okay, and I mean, I'm getting the sense here too, I take it all these sewers, before the community absorbs them, would be inspected, and any upgrades would fall back to said strata. Is that correct, Helen? Or Brent, sorry?
Through the chair, I'm more than pleased to answer that. Part of our cost compilation seeking for tonight and to bring back is to look at what those improvements would be, and then to include them as potential cost for council's consideration in taking over the system. Through our negotiations with the strata, that's a very fine line that we're looking at. And so we want to bring those back to council and have that discussion at the time when we better have determined what those costs may be. We think that the strata system is pretty functional though, and we're just looking to video it to ensure that it is.
Okay, and I see there's something about inspection ports. Does that mean those have to be installed or what?
The standard of the day compared to the standard of today is the requirement of those inspection chambers. I think that all municipal systems are installed with them now because they provide a clean demarcation between the private property and the municipal responsibility. However, that would be an additional cost of thousands per household. So we will itemize what that cost may be and allow it to be part of the considerations that council considers in taking on the system or considering taking on the system as a municipal system. Thank you.
Okay, and also this doesn't include, I mean, I see they're going to have to enter into an LSA like the rest of us that are on sewer. I take it there'll be a per household connection fee and stuff as per a normal connection.
That's exactly one of the reasons why we want to bring the costs of incorporating that system component into ours. The value of the land that we're taking on exceeds those potential costs. And so the strata has actually requested that we absorb the LSA charges. There would be a user charge, but not the LSA charge as presently proposed between the negotiations.
So the community would be paying to hook them up?
With the residual value of the land.
That's I get correct. That part. What does the original contract specify with regard to these hookups?
So there is no contract, except for, as outlined in the report, there was several missteps, and the strata believes that this would have formed part of the initial consideration at the consideration for the transfer of the land. That's exactly why we wish to table those costs so that council has a full itemized understanding of what taking over this system would entail and the benefit provided to Colwood and as realized by the strata. I know that's not a direct answer, but we're looking to figure out those costs.
Sorry, I said contract and I meant the covenant document here, which is actually quite an interesting read for a non-lawyer or engineer, let me tell you. And talk to me about this. Now, what about those sewers that are in the dry sewers that are in the ground? I take it, is that part of the inspection process as well?
That's exactly correct. Part of the negotiation for the drain right away to become a statutory right away means we go out. We're also going to look at all the dry sewers. We are also going to look at the dry sewers to ensure that they are functional and ready for connection. That's exactly correct.
Perfect. And then these three properties impacted by this covenant, I take it this is just some missing language because the pipes are already in the ground?
We are certainly hoping so. We have to do a little bit of investigation. And if we need to knock on doors, we certainly will.
And I take it the upsell here is that those three properties will quickly be able to connect to a sewer.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't see anything else from anybody. Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Brent. So I'm going to call the motion. Anyone opposed, please go ahead and raise your hand. Councillor Kobayashi, did you get a chance to vote on that? Sorry, I just called the vote. Were you opposed at all? You're muted. You're not opposed? You're good?
Not opposed. I'm good. I have to shut off and turn back on again. Sorry.
I had to do that once too. Welcome back. And that motion passes Amanda, thank you. And on to 6.2, Yasmin, this is the Grousewood variance.
Hi there, I'm going to share my screen. I have a presentation for the Grousewood.
Thank you.
Can you all see my screen now?
It looks good.
Okay, good. So the report that is in your agendas for this item is a development variance permit application that we received from the property owner at 727 Grousewood Place. The request is to add to construct an accessory dwelling unit at the front of the lot. It is a very large property with the principal home located at the very rear of the property. And the property owner is looking to add a small 60 square meter in size accessory dwelling unit. And given the fact that the existing home is accompanied by a detached garage, our land use bylaw limits the amount of accessory buildings on a lot to a maximum floor area of 60 square meters. So by adding an accessory dwelling unit, that is not integrated with that garage, then it would be increasing the size of the accessory buildings on the lot. You can see that the context of the location is very much large lots in a hillside neighborhood. You can see the topography of the lot by having a look at the site plan. So where the existing home is located in a flatter part, the flatter portion, rear portion of the lot, and the front portion of the lot, the home where the 60 square meter roughly accessory dwelling unit would be located and wedged in between kind of a rock outcrop that would separate the principal home and these smaller accessory dwelling unit at the front. The official community plan is very clear in its desire to support gentle infill of existing neighborhoods, especially where we could enable the creation of accessory dwelling units and other gentle forms of infill and providing this opportunity for property owners. Given the size of the lot, the location, the topography of the lot, and the context of these large lot within the neighborhood, we feel that the impact of increasing or doubling the amount of accessory buildings on the lot would be fairly minimal on any neighbors, and that it would add another dwelling unit to that neighborhood and hopefully an opportunity for gentle infill and affordable housing in the form of an accessory dwelling unit, which is the goal of the official community plan, and expanding the housing choices throughout the neighborhoods. A development permit sign has been posted on the property to advertise the request that is being made of council, and provided that council, committee of the whole recommends to council further consideration of these requests. We will be sending out notices to neighbors within 75 meters of the property and letting them know of the request and their opportunities to provide comment and input for council's consideration further down the line at a council meeting. I think the staff recommendation is as written in the report, and there are also other options to consider: deferring the application for further information, or denying the application, I suppose. But the staff recommendation is to have it considered for approval. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Yasmin. Councillor Baxter. Unmute yourself, please. And can you unshare your screen, please, Yasmin?
I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor, sorry, is that it, or do you have anything further?
That's all I got.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through the chair, Yasmin, can you just tell me what an accessory dwelling unit is? Because I went through this whole thing and I didn't understand what it was. So could you explain what that is? Thank you.
Where you put your in?
Yeah, no problem. So an accessory dwelling unit is the way in which we call a carriage house in Colwood. So it's a carriage house or a laneway house. I guess we don't have lanes, generally speaking, so we can call them laneway houses or carriage houses. So we call them accessory dwelling units, and it's a more general.
I assumed that's what it was. Okay, thank you very much for clarifying
that. Thanks, Councillor Kobayashi. Mayor Martin, sorry, and then Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you. I know for my unit or for my home, if I was to do a carriage suite, I would be required to remove my shed because I would exceed the 60 meter. What was it discussed with the proponent at all about removing their garage or their detached building, and why would we want to encourage both a detached building and a residential? I'm also wondering, is that detached building able to be retrofitted so that it could provide that accessory building, that carriage house suite? And then finally, the last thing, and I will say this, council passed a variance for my next door neighbor, and the unintended consequence, which I didn't even anticipate, was basically what we did was we began to turn things into panhandle lots. And would we be creating a panhandle lot with this if we approve this building? Those are my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Yasmin?
So I guess, so the existing garage is over 20 years old, I believe. I can't remember the exact time at which it was constructed. So I do believe that the request for council to consider a variance is just a way for you to consider the fact that retrofitting this garage that is existing, this existing garage was never meant to be a 2-story or have a configuration that would enable adding a suite on top. So it is very likely that retrofitting an existing building that was never meant to have that residential occupancy would be quite cost prohibiting. And yeah, I guess the option is for the applicant to make that request to council and have it be considered. Why would staff support it? I think it's based on the official community plan being quite supportive of gentle infill and allowing and enabling property owners to find ways within the regulations that are enabled through the land use bylaw, which is carriage homes and secondary suites, to create this gentle infill. If the variance is not granted, ultimately, if the property owner wants to pursue the accessory dwelling unit, then they will have to remove the garage to accommodate the additional 60 square meters of a dwelling, for sure. And regarding the panhandle, so this is not, so we've discussed with the applicant the subdivision option for them. It is a very large lot where they could technically subdivide without a need of a panhandle. They would have the frontage that they require. However, that is not an option that the applicant is feels is necessary to pursue to meet the needs that he has just for a small additional home or dwelling unit added to the home. So at this point, it is not a panhandle. It'll be just accessing the lot through the existing driveway with I guess an additional driveway that goes off to the accessory dwelling unit.
Thank you. So just speaking to the motion, I will not be supporting the motion this evening. I am very supportive of infill housing and carriage suites, but I think this can be accomplished without this variance. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm going to support this motion. I drove up and had a look. I couldn't even see the house from the road. It's quite a large lot, as Yasmin has said. No concerns. I like the idea of gentle infill. If this isn't gentle infill, I don't know what is. Yasmin, my only questions are we going to be seeing other variances related to this? Like, will there be tree issues or driveway issues or grade issues or sewer issues or anything like this? Or will this get the applicant what he needs if we move this forward?
I believe this will get the applicant what he needs to move it forward. This is an environmental development permit area on the hillside. So there is a development permit that is being processed concurrently with this development variance permit. So there will be an arborist report documenting the status and health of the trees that may need to be removed to make room for a driveway and an equivalent kind of replacement replanting plan associated with the approval as part of the environmental development permit. But I do not, they will meet the parking requirements, and I do believe that this is all they need to proceed.
Thank you.
Seeing no other hands, I'd like to call the question. For anyone who's opposed, go ahead and please raise your hand. And I see Mayor Martin is the only one with his hand raised. The motion passes and Mayor Martin is opposed. And 6.3, Yasmin, you're up again, Byzantine Way this time.
Oh, yeah, so I will be sharing my screen again.
Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Sorry, yes, I can. Is that Leonard?
Yes, it's Leonard, and I'm seeing that you're probably moving on from my issue to others, and I just wanted to speak for a second.
Go ahead. I see that you're here on my list. I missed you, Leonard. Sorry about that. So go ahead. I take it are you someone that lives in the neighborhood, or are you the applicant?
I'm the applicant.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I've been working on this for a couple of years now. I started with Richard Buchan, and it kind of got a life of its own as we were going, because we started off just needing to take care of a dangerous tree and one that's breaking up my driveway. And it kind of morphed itself into this idea of an accessory building on the lower portion. And what Richard said, because we had the garage already in place, is that, we could address all the issues by doing a development variance because of taking care of the trees that are near my primary residence, and then being able to put a small place at the bottom of the lot to accommodate a family member. And so, in the process, Richard went on to other things, and then I got busy doing some stuff, so we didn't get going on anything, and then finally picked up and started going again, and then communicated with Yasmin, and she said, well, what I'm looking at is triggering a development because it goes beyond the variance. We were looking at a house in Langford to move, and it was a recently upgraded home, and it was small, 1,000 square feet, and this economically seemed to be the best bet for us to place a home at the bottom. And anyways, through this, we didn't want to do a development because that wasn't our intention. It was to subdivide. But we did want to have a separate residence for the family members. So we gave up on the idea of moving the house because it was 1,000 square feet, which didn't conform to what we were going to be allowed to fit into the variance request. So it gets a little bit complicated because we don't have sewer up there either. We're on a septic field. And so my question is, part of it is in this whole thing is I wanted to, initially I thought we would tie into our existing sewer, but then I found out that, or our septic, and I found out that that would all of a sudden trigger an upgrade of our septic system, and which was probably around 30 grand. And so our septic system is functioning fine. And so, and I was not certain as to when the sewer would be up the Grousewood Road, if at all, in the near future. So I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on upgrading a septic system that was going to be obsolete in a year. Just doesn't make sense. So a lot of this stuff kind of goes hand in hand with one another, and I don't want to duplicate or increase the costs of this whole project, you know, by
can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I just ask a question, Leonard? Sorry. You understand that your motion passed, right? And the variance, we've supported it.
Okay.
So unfortunately, sorry, I should have called on you a little bit early in the process, but council didn't have a problem with your request whatsoever. So it now has passed. Does that satisfy what you have to say?
Oh, no,
or anything else
it's
you want
all
to share?
It's great because then we can move forward. So, but
and if you're talking sewers on Triangle Mountain, I mean, that's a whole nother meeting and another night.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know whether that should be part of this discussion. I had talked to my wife about it, and I said, really, all they want to talk about is the variance, and anything else is going to be a bit problematic.
So unfortunately, I do know, I encourage you to talk to your neighbors and that, and petition for a local sewer agreement, or a local sewer area, sorry, and conceivably you as a group of owners could bring it up Grousewood. That would be one strategy you might employ, because I take your point. You spend 50 grand on your septic field to find out that the next year, you know, the sewers are that much closer to your property.
Right. One thing that I do need to ask, and I don't know if this all of a sudden becomes a bit of a starts the ball rolling again, and I don't want to do that. I'd like to move forward, but we were looking at the house that was still in Langford. It's on a site that they want to build a condominium building, and there's a chunk of it that doesn't have to come with it, but there's a chunk of it that does bring it over the I guess it's 645 square feet is what I'm going to be limited to. And the house with the chunk that would be left on ends up being about 710 square feet. Is this a whole nother meeting, or is there the ability to request?
You have a bunch of civic politicians here with limited skill sets, in at least I speak for myself. I really suggest that you take that up with our engineering staff as far as that kind of processes. really our purview is the bylaw itself. But maybe I can make a love connection with Mr. Molnar here. I see he's signing on, our Director of Engineering.
That's exactly right. And through the chair, Leonard, please give me a shout or touch base through Yasmin, and we can work our way through all your questions. Thank you very much for tabling them tonight. But we are here to help you. So just reach out through email or phone. Thanks very much, Leonard.
Okay, perfect. I'll do that. And
Perfect.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you so much. So from this point forward, this committee is going to make a recommendation to the next council meeting that your variance be adopted. So this is sort of the first step. The next step will come up at the next council meeting, and it'll be in the bylaws section.
Okay.
Hey, thank you so much for participating.
Excellent. Thank you.
And now I apologize back to you, Yasmin, for Byzantine Way.
No problem. I will now share my screen. 1 sec. Can you all see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay. So the second variance of this evening is a development variance permit application for 595 Bensanto Way. It is at the end of Bensanto south, on the south side of Bensanto Way. It is an application asking for a reduction to the front yard setback that is established by the zone, by the CD, oh good Lord, 12, 13, I'm like blanking out, but yeah, the existing zone for this property establishes a 7.5 meter setback, and the applicant has been working, drafting various site plans and working on developing this site that has some complexity to it. There's a wetland at the southwest corner of the lot that backs onto the Olympic View lands. So there's a respective 15 meter SPIA that needs to be a non-built area, as well as a big rock outcrop and ridge line that runs along the east property line. And so there has been lots of work going on assessing the development options for this site. And so far, the applicant has landed on a proposal for developing a first phase of this development along the street frontage of Bensanto Way. If you had a chance to visit the site, that section along Bensanto Way, immediately adjacent to the road, has been previously cleared and regraded. So there has been site alterations that had historically taken place on that portion of the property. So the environmental concerns for this particular section of development are much, much less and further reduced without that, the complexity that is at the back of the site. So the applicant is at the moment proposing these 8 townhome proposal that would have access kind of as a horseshoe road that would access one-way access for the residents to access their townhome through the back of the property, and having a very strong street presence and fronting onto Bensanto and framing the street with 3-story townhomes. There is a proposed elevation drawings and detail work that has happened to try and align the built form with the official community plan guidelines for this type of development on a hillside. And the developer has done a good job raising those patios, so elevating it from the street and giving that sense of privacy and separation between the street and the private unit, while still making quite an efficient use of the site by bringing it forward to almost a zero lot line and framing the street, but still maintaining a sense of privacy and giving each of the units a little bit of public outdoor space facing the street with those raised, elevated porches or patios, covered patios and porches, entrances. It's a very strong interface with the street. And we really like the fact that there will be no driveways or not individual driveways accessing or breaking up the pattern of that street frontage. And that is consistent with a lot of the design guidelines that we're trying to implement with multifamily developments. There are a number of the design guidelines that these type of development and street frontage is supported through. And I think the report goes in depth as to the various design guidelines that we are trying to encourage by supporting this type of proposal. A development permit has also been placed on the property and is notifying nearby property owners and residents that this request is being made of council. And we're committee of the whole to recommend this request to go forward to council. Then we will be mailing out notices to property owners and residents within 75 meters of the property to let them know of their opportunity to speak and provide feedback for further consideration at the time when council will be making a final determination. The options are the staff recommendation as per the report, which recommends moving it forward to a council meeting with a positive recommendation. But other options include deferring the application for further information, as well as having the application be denied or recommending that council denies the application. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have, and I believe the applicant is also present for you to have any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin. And let's not make that mistake again. The applicant I see is here. Is that 3 Point? Is that right? Mr. Tucker, if you have anything to share that hasn't been said by Yasmin, that'd be great.
I don't think I have much to add. I think Yasmin did a good job, and we've worked with the your planning department in general to work out a way that best works with the current OCP. This is a remainder site of development, a previous development. Much which, or all of previous, was designed within under the previous OCP, and so working through to fit this into the current OCP, that is the best portion of land that is the lightest on the land. It's a flat portion of land, and as Yasmin mentioned, to try and pull the homes closer to the street and give that front door and front porch presence to the street versus a number of individual driveways was the preference of planning and a preference of us as well, as it'll create a nicer feeling on Byzantin, which will ultimately become a throughway to the lands beyond on Olympic View there. So it was just trying to work with that, what is a very tricky site, and I think we're quite happy with where we landed on that, to try and create something nice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tucker. Let's see if council has any questions. Councillor Baxter.
I applied my magnifying glass to the plan view of the site plan, and it seems to me that there is a a small distance between the edge of the sidewalk and the raised porch of these houses. Is that correct?
Yes, so they are not at the zero lot line. There is a little bit of wiggle room, and there's definitely at least 0.5, I would say 0.5 of a meter, just to accommodate the eaves and roof overhangs that normally homes have. But I guess I didn't want a variance that was too restrictive, and then find out that then the survey show it's like 0.4 and not 0.5. So we are working with the applicant in good faith, knowing, and I think that's why the condition on the motion says, provided that there are no encroachments onto the road right away. We're comfortable knowing that the design is not at property line close to it, but there will be landscaping, grass that interfaces between the road and the units. And as the lot curves in, the units at the end have a little bit more room. Like there's some units that have even more of a gap in distance from the road than others.
Okay, thank you. Then I'd like to move the recommendation with a slight change. On the last line between no and building, I'd like to insert the words part of any. So it reads that no part of any building or structure projects into the public right of way.
Thank you, Michael. Amanda, did you get that?
I did, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I was going to make the motion myself. I can actually say this is just down the street from where I live. So I get to see it every day, and I walk by the development where the proposed development is going to be. And I think it's going to look good there, to tell you the truth. It suits the current situation. Even the 4 single houses that would be right beside the 4 single detached homes that are right beside this development, they don't even have a 7.5 meter setback. I'm pretty sure they've got small front lawns. Like it's about 4 strokes of a lawnmower and the lawns are done. So it's going to look well there. If anything has to go there, I believe it's going to look good. So I'm just throwing my support behind this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Mr. Tucker, I see your hand up. I'd just like to canvass any more council members. Anything else? Just one thought from me. Yasmin, I take it we're not to the rear property line. Is there a setback and some green space at the back of the property?
Yeah, so I guess the back of the property is where most of the environmental sensitivity and concerns are. There's a lot more environmental reporting and a lot more analysis that the applicant needs to provide and work with us to find those pockets of buildable area that are sensitive to the environment and retain some of the rock outcrops that we're seeking to have not be disturbed. So we do anticipate that there will be a sizable amount of open space, open green space, just because of that SPIA and wetland portion of the land. And I think the ultimate design or development plan for that back portion of the lot is yet to be defined, and we will continue to work with the applicant to find the most suitable build form that complements what we're kind of working towards on Bensanto and builds on that, and it remains sensitive to the environmental concerns at the back. So more work to be done.
Thank you. And Chris, I see your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, just as Councillor Kobayashi said, the neighboring properties, we took that into account when we look at that streetscape as a whole and trying to make that work within the existing architecture in the existing neighborhood there in the best way that we could. And to speak to the point that Yasmin was just making is that if we as we hopefully push this forward, it allows us to stay more out of the natural area, more out of the rocks that we want to keep there, the rocky outcropping, that ridge line there. And this specific area where we're proposing to build is really just flat and gravel, and so it allows us to kind of use that section of land in a way and leave other sections of lands ideally untouched. And so we've been working with Brent and Yasmin to try and find the best solution for what to do behind there, and I think we can find something that works really well.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Brent, I see you turned your screen on. Do you have something to add?
No, nothing to add. Thank you for asking.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call the question then. Anyone opposed to this application, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Tucker. And Yasmin for doing most of the work tonight.
Yes. Thank you all very much.
I think that just about does it. I see the next meeting is June 21st, the next meeting of the committee. And I will be seeking a motion of adjournment. Someone has to put their hand up because Gord isn't here tonight. Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. Have a great evening, everybody.